Welcome back, and we're here with Dr. John Eckhardt and Pastor Kevin Kidd. During the break, we were talking about the fact that many times when we're so issue-driven, sometimes we end up perhaps alienating people, that we need to have other kinds of goals necessarily than getting our way. You want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think the important thing is that, the primary goal, of course, is to follow Jesus. So I think that when people are intending to be polarizing, intentionally being issue-driven, it's a horrible goal. But if we're following Jesus, that is going to create some polarization, because some people are following darkness, some are following light.
And we have even a whole sector of Christianity in America that I think we all respect what they're seeking to do. The whole Tea Party thing, and the Republican sector of the nation, and the more conservative Christians. I think we're fighting for certain truths that we hold, to be really unquestionable and uncompromisable, if you will. And at the same time, we are risking appearing as too issue-driven. I mean, we live in a polarized nation right now where everything is like really crystal clear, one side and the other. There's very little room for ironic, peaceful spirits. And how can we escape that trap of while seeking to foment unity and affect the culture and be winsome, and at the same time we don't want to compromise and be wimpy either. But right now I think it's almost impossible to do both, to be winsome and to be scriptural. Any thoughts on that? I
think it's finding commonality. Where is our commonality in the two poles here? In the analogy you just used, I think there's some commonality that both sides, Tea Party and the other side, both have a desire to see the poor assisted in some kind of way. We just have different beliefs about what the distribution model is. Most people on the right side would say the church is a proper model with equipping, strengthening, and helping the poor, whereas the other side might say the government is the distribution model for assisting that. So we have different ideas about the distribution of where the aid comes from, but the reality is that we both want to see the poor helped and lifted up.
Yeah, and somehow that model is not getting through, because it's easy for us to appear as, we're just, we want to keep corporate America happy and Wall Street, and we just don't care about the poor, and we're just into a religious thing and not caring enough about social justice and so on. How do we escape that image?
We just have to have true relationship. And we need to sit down at the table and work it out. We can do that. One of the things that we found in Maine that's been such a blessing is the scripture in Malachi chapter 3, verses 15 or 16. I keep forgetting exactly where it is. But Malachi 3, we think of that as the giving, the tithing scripture, but it's the example given us about corporate leadership in Malachi 3 is those who feared the Lord counseled together regularly. The Lord took note of them and wrote their names in a book. And this struck us in Maine, where as we were beginning to say we need to build a relationship. For so long the Lord has been saying, don't do this alone, build relationships. I'm going to lead you into building relationships. Arrange your schedules, clear the decks, relationships key. And then we began to do that, and this scripture just kept bubbling out of us, where if it's so God-pleasing that when we counsel together, what is counseling together? It's having a forum and talking things out, airing things out. Another one of those words that we have trouble with is rhetoric. We say, it's just a bunch of rhetoric. Well, we used to have college classes and high school classes on rhetoric. It's the art of having a conversation. And now we just say, it's just all semantics. Well, yeah, but semantics are important. That's not supposed to be a bad word either. So just the counseling together, like we're doing here tonight. I'm coming away from here with a greater appreciation for who you are, and who Kevin is. Although I already know you somewhat. I think I like you, but I'm having that affirmed. Me more,
maybe not as much.
Yeah, right. I'll have to talk to your wife about whether or not I should really know you any better. But if we take that time to just air it out, to have the conversation, we're going to find that the thing that the Lord began in the majority of us as leaders, it's really hard to find someone in ministry who's really a bonehead. We have right hearts. We're in this thing because we love God and we love God's people. Certainly we can work this out. if we'd sit down at the table and work it out.
Yeah, we're hearing over and over again this in our conversation, our council, so to speak. You know, this combination of the fruit of the Spirit and the gift of the Spirit. Yeah. I mean, if we can somehow project in our gatherings, in our efforts for unity, in our efforts to affect the culture, being able to project the fruit of the Spirit, to exercise patience, love, self-sacrifice, a servant spirit, while at the same time also remaining faithful to the word of the Lord. Somehow finding that combination, I think, seems to be kind of the key for the Spirit of God to move and to start achieving the things that we so desperately want. If we're not so results driven, but trust the process, you know, perhaps we will see God do more than we think.
It's not like we're without our prototype, right? And we had Jesus. He pulled it off pretty well. So.
How do you see that? Yeah. I mean, how can we incorporate that Spirit of Christ?
Well,
Philippians 2, 5-11, let there be the same Spirit.
Jesus being the prototype, you know, it says John 5:19 that he never did anything unless he saw the Father doing it, you know. And if we're all, individually and corporately having this kind of mindset where we're trying to find out what Dad is doing and doing that, we're going to capture that heart, that servant heart. You know, he's going to lead us into having a servant attitude, and he's going to lead us into laying hands on the sick and raising the dead and things like that, where the gifts of the Spirit are moving. We're going to move prophetically because we see God doing something, and we're announcing it, we're decreeing it, we're declaring it, you know, in a corporate situation.
Yeah. The image came to me of a woman giving birth. She has to relax. You know? Yeah, she has to push, but she also has to relax. If she's too tense. And I think the church, perhaps, you know, we're trying to give birth, trying to bear fruit. And perhaps we need to find that balance between pushing hard and, you know, staying focused on the result, but at the same time relaxing, letting God do the part of the work that He can only do.
Yeah, that's good.
Because if not, you know, we risk interfering with His intention.
You know, if any of us think that we're not on a journey, it's really a pretty arrogant thought. And I think sometimes we just need to be reminded that we're all on a journey somehow. You know, we started out part of this conversation with, you know, my starting point was Lutheranism and Jewishness. As I got into the Word, I found I'm on a journey. But there's a lot of folks who started out Baptist, and then they found out sola scriptura, the truth that Luther brought out, and they incorporate, like a wise scribe, they incorporate that as a new part to their faith. They didn't become Lutheran just because they accepted a truth that Luther brought forth. And so we want to pigeonhole each other, it seems. And it's so dysfunctional to do that, to hang a title or a moniker on each other. Yeah. And I think we just need to stop doing that more, you know, a whole lot less than we do it presently. And
to give God a little more room and more space. I think God takes time to work these things out. I mean, we're the ones who are in a rush. God is He's not sweating at all. He's taking His time. He loves process. He loves cultivating, you know, those relationships. He wants us to take our time, enjoy the ride, get to know each other, take time to have fun, break bread together, and let the results up to the Lord. You know, as Paul says, you know, what was it in Spanish? I know it. It says, I planted, somebody else watered, and the Lord gives the growth. I mean, we do our part without an issue orientation, and then we trust that if we do the things according to the biblical model, then God will bring the fruit, and He will lead us to give birth.
I think the American mindset and the American culture, we're looking at the fruit or the product. And I think, and more in the Hebrew culture, they're saying that the process and the journey is the most important part of the whole thing.
Indeed, indeed. Well, let's stop here for a moment. I think in our next segment, we'll be wrapping things up, and we hope that as we continue this dialogue, we can come to some crisp conclusions regarding this search for unity and the power that we need in order to carry out the mandate that God has given us in this culture. So stay tuned, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.